Hello, Pulp Hounds. So, yeah, this should have been yesterday, but busy week, and there's been no vinyl chat this week. I will rectify that. So, today, I'm doing a bit of a kind of different video. It's in two halves, because the author I want to talk about, it's not going to be a particularly long video. So, I wanted to have a look at Stuart Kinder. Now, there's only two books by Stuart Kinder that seem to be out there. One is very cheap, and one seems to be relatively expensive. So let's have a look if they're worth getting, and have a little chat about Stuart Kinder. So Stuart Kinder's first book from 1984 is The Institute. The world's worst nightmare is about to be born. The Institute. Be warned. I know there's only two books by Stuart Kinder, but they both feature warnings, which is quite interesting. So The Institute is about... basically, it's about a chap called Mike Stoner, who... there's a series of bizarre deaths that don't make sense amongst wealthy, well-to-do ladies. And they all die horribly, and Mike Stoner starts putting it together that they're all dying in the same way, and it is quite gruesome. And then he uncovers more about, obviously it's called The Institute, so there's an institute involved, that's not a spoiler, it's literally on the front of the book. So he kind of figures out that they've all been to this same fertility clinic. And it starts to unfold from there. And it becomes apparent that Stuart Kinder has some kind of contempt or grudge against attractive, wealthy women. It gets a little bit weird because they're it's like he's trying to punish them through his fiction. And towards the end of the book, it's just there's a paragraph and a paragraph and a paragraph and a paragraph, and each one is like a hideous death of some poor middle class, fairly wealthy, attractive lady that is kind of done no wrong. The Institute is the cheaper one, which you can get for a couple of quid, but it's not really a horror book. It's more like a medical thriller, and I think it does say on it, it makes reference to coma, which for some reason, as I've said before in my videos, for some reason set the benchmark for any kind of medical horror. It's like if you enjoyed and I've said before, I didn't really care for Coma that much. It's not one of my favourites at all. But there's books I've right enjoyed that are if you enjoyed Coma, you'll love this. It's stop using Coma as the benchmark, 80s publishers. You've been told. The slightly more expensive one, the considerably more expensive one, is Cannibal. Which, I kind of get why it's more expensive. It's quite lurid. More lurid than The Institute, I think. The Institute is just right, okay, so, as I've said before, if you engage with this kind of entertainment from a bygone era, attitudes were different. So, The Institute feels quite misogynistic with its aggression towards women. Now, I'm not saying that's alright, and I'm not saying that that's something that is fine to include in forms of entertainment, but it was included, and as I've said before, if you engage with retro, vintage forms of extreme entertainment, there's going to be attitudes that nowadays, if somebody wrote that novel, people would look at and kind of be a bit oh, I'm not sure that's all right, mate. So in The Institute, it is quite misogynistic. In Cannibal, there's issues of race, and I'm not saying racism is excusable in any way, because it's not, but you engage with this kind of entertainment and there's going to be themes that, from a modern point of view, are distasteful. So Cannibal is about Gary Mitchell, like the lost Mitchell brother. And he is a journalist, and he gets embroiled in this tribal... He ends up going to, like, what was Rhodesia, West Africa, and gets embroiled in this kind of ritualistic eating of corpses in order to ingratiate himself with the tribes there and stuff. And as far as warnings go, Cannibal has got many more warnings. I love warnings. So on the back it does warn you that The Cannibal is a novel of utmost horror that will take the reader far beyond the limits of ordinary fear into unmapped territories of total terror. And even in the beginning, the opening blurb is, "Have you got the stomach for Cannibal? Be warned, The Cannibal is no ordinary horror novel. It's the story of an intelligent, adventurous young man with everything to live for, who, because of a grisly African curse inflicted on him, becomes a ravening, murderous ghoul, will test the nerves of the most hardened reader of terror fiction. If you are easily shocked or frightened, do not, repeat, not attempt to read The Cannibal. You have been warned." Genius! I love that kind of nonsense. It always makes me laugh. So, the Institute and The Cannibal, they're kind of odd because they don't read like horror books at all. They read almost like somebody that has not read a lot of any kind of horror trying to write a horror book for horror readers, and it feels they feel a little bit odd. They're both good. I think I prefer The Cannibal to The Institute, because The Institute does... It's weird, it kind of meanders, but it's punctuated by these horrendous deaths of wealthy, attractive women. Whereas The Cannibal is more of a descent into Gary Mitchell's kind of mad obsessions about eating ladies. But yeah, it's kind of weird because they genuinely don't read like a horror book. It's very odd to read something that's like plastered with warnings, like you have never read a horror book like this one. Yeah, because it's not really a horror book. It's just like a story punctuated by violence and attempts at trying to make everything stomach churning, but not described in the way that, say, Sean Hudson describes gore. In a way that... I don't know how to say it without sounding like some dickhead horror snob, but like almost like pedestrian. So it's almost like, you know, like all the kind of Blumhouse type films that are on at the cinema, and people say, "Oh, we're off to see a horror movie," and you say, "Oh, what are you off to see?" And they go, "I don't know," and they don't care. They just want to go and see a horror movie and jump at the jump scares and have fun with their friends in the cinema. The film is unimportant. It's the impact of the scares and the gore. Whereas if you watch a lot of horror movies and you start to kind of refine your tastes and find other things and other ideas that are going to frighten you, that kind of very commercial pedestrian horror, I find it becomes a little frustrating. Now, if you like all that, then genius. I am so glad that there's big horror movies, big budget American jump scare horror movies that are on at the cinema, because there's nothing like watching horror films at the cinema. it's not for me, and I'm not criticising you if you love that, so don't get peeved at me. But these books feel a little bit like that. It's almost like someone's written this horror book, or these two books, in an attempt to shock and disturb, but without any knowledge of the genre, which is really interesting. That's kind of one of the reasons why I enjoyed reading them. So, Stuart Kinder is obviously a pseudonym. 2 books, published by Grafton, big publisher. It's an author that's established somewhere else. Because I don't think many people would do 2 books. Many authors would do like 2 books and then never do anything else. And from all my internet researches, I've been looking for a few weeks, and there's only 2 by Stuart Kinder. Nothing else. So who was he, or is he? Well, that's unclear also. Now, I love trying to figure out the whole pseudonym thing, but then it becomes a pain in the arse. If anybody's seen my Peter Saxon video, it's kind of like, oh, let's figure out who this person was or is. But then it's just like, oh my word, this is so complicated. Because when you get into the whole pseudonym thing, it can go a little bit crazy and just get baffling. But it's quite easy to discount people. At first I thought it might have been one of the chaps that contributed to the author Harry Adam Knight. But they're good horror. They've got horror elements. They're written by people that have an understanding of horror. The Institute and the Cannibal, they're not horror books, like I said. So it's not somebody with like a kind of decent horror pedigree. So after much hunting round, checking on message boards and blogs and all sorts, there isn't a lot about Stuart Kinder. One theory that keeps being postulated, which kind of makes sense to me, and yet the more I looked into it, the more it kind of everything fit together, is that it's Angus Wells. Now, Angus Wells wrote, it didn't really have a lot of horror stuff out. He wrote a lot of fantasy under his own name and edited sci-fi anthologies under his own name. But for the majority of the books that he had published, they were under a pseudonym. And Stuart Kinder is obviously a pseudonym. So as Andrew Quiller, he wrote the Eagles books. They're like historical Roman gladiators. I've read one and quite enjoyed it. And doing this video, it's kind of like, I need to get more of the Eagles series because they are quite good fun. As Richard Kirk, he wrote the Raven series, the fantasy, with Robert Holdstock, who, again, was no stranger to pseudonyms. The whole pseudonym gang are all here. As William S. Brady, he wrote the Hawk series and the Peacemaker series. We're starting to get into the Westerns now, and that's something that Angus Wells wrote an awful lot of. As J.D. Sandon, he wrote The Gringos. As James Muir, he wrote Breed, which, well, according to some websites, whoever wrote Breed, which are actually quite good. Some websites say it's Angus Wells. I collect them because a lot of websites say it's Lawrence James, and I'm a huge Lawrence James fan. As Charles Garrett, he wrote The Gunslinger. As J.B. Dancer, he wrote The Lawmen. But the series that I know him best for, which I think is my all-time favourite Wild West series, is Jubalcade. He wrote all the Jubalcade books. So we've got somebody that wrote in a few genres but was quite prolific, but never really made a name for horror. And that kind of fits as well because, like I said, The Institute and the Cannibal really don't feel like horror books. Don't spend too much on them. If I've tempted you, you can get The Institute for a couple of quid. The Cannibal's a bit more because it looks like it's going to be more of a lurid horror thing, and it's got the word cannibal on the title. In the title. They're very interesting and entertaining books, but with the warnings of misogyny and racism. Not racism. They're not racist. They're racially insensitive, which they're not quite actively like, that's shockingly racist. They're just like, that's inappropriate. Just to put it out there, I don't want to recommend any books that people are going to go, I don't like, that's really, yeah, you get me. I'm not going to keep banging on about it. But there's no confirmed proof or anything like that of who Stuart Kinder actually is or was. Unfortunately, Angus Wells has passed away, so if it was Angus Wells, I'm not sure we're ever going to get it confirmed. But they're two books that are interesting, and I wanted to talk about possibly who wrote them. However, it's quite short, that, isn't it? So we're going to have a quick break in a minute, and I've got a little pile of recent pickups. So we're going to have a quick message from today's sponsor. You get yourselves a cup of tea, and I shall be back in a moment.
If you were the only boy in the world and I were the only girl, there would be such wonderful things to do. I could do those things for you.
She was admiring my tie.
It's my favorite too.
Favorite ties are matchmates. They do tend to get noticed. In Terraline and Crimply, favorite matchmates for the only boy in the world.
Right, so pickups. I've had quite a good week or two for finding bits and bobs. Some in the wild, some I've bought online. There's one or two that haven't arrived yet, but I wanted to do a video, and it'll be a good pickups video, so they can go in next times. I've got some like cool occulty stuff. First up is Chadwick Hansen. Oh, I'll do it that side. Chadwick Hansen, Witchcraft at Salem. I really love these early 70s Arrow. They did like a series of things about witchcraft and stuff like that. I've got like the Black Art by Rollo Ahmed in this series, and I absolutely adore this kind of plain black cover, author title, boom, something sinister about it. So that was a pickup, and I'm glad to find another one of those. The problem is when you try and order them, you don't know which Arrow edition you're getting, because to a lot of book dealers the edition isn't important, and to avid ravenous paperback collectors the edition is so flipping important. I got a Penguin one, which I didn't think was a Penguin one, but apparently it is. It's part of the Penguin educational series, Witchcraft and Sorcery, and it's quite interesting. It's like essays on witchcraft from all over the world, and witchcraft and kind of traditional folk beliefs and things like that, but more from an anthropological point of view. And I just thought that looked really interesting. It's nice design. It looks very cool, doesn't it? I bought this one online. I got a lovely future of the Occult Reich Now, I'm not making light of the atrocities that the Third Reich carried out. And I don't think they were mystics and dreamers. But I do find the whole thing about the occult symbolism that the Third Reich adopted, I think it's strange and fascinating. Now, I don't think for one second this is going to be super factually accurate. I think that J.H. Brennan probably just wanted to sell a book about, like, oh, Hitler went off looking for the Hollow Earth and stuff like that. So that's I'm looking forward to reading that one, but got to be taken with a pinch of salt. That was actually from an Oxfam. And then I found a really gorgeous copy of The Lancashire Witches by Harrison Ainsworth. I love that cover. That's so nice. It's a great chunk. Look at the size of that. You could choke a horse with that. I've actually got... Oh, it's the cover illustrator's credited. It's Albin Trotsky. Not an illustrator I know, but I'm definitely going to kind of have a little Google. Now, I've got, like, what I think is a fairly tatty first edition of The Lancashire Witches, which is a bit crumbling, and I've had it for absolutely years, and I think it's quite fascinating, especially being northern, the whole kind of Witches of Pendle Forest thing. And this is a very beautiful illustrated, I'll put some of the pictures up, illustrated edition, but it's been cut, like, not all the pages are separated. So it's not that easy to read, and it's not very easy to stick in my satchel just to carry about. So I wanted like a nice paperback of it, so I could have a reread of it without worrying about that book, which, looking online, even a bit tatty, seems to be considerably creeping up in price. So I also ordered, a friend of mine told me about Freak by Mark Burnell, which cropped up as a New English Library 80s horror paperback. Brilliant. Not one I had, not one I'd heard of. So I ordered it, and they've sent the hardback. Which, from a book dealer's point of view, they either didn't know that there would be a difference to a collector, or just thought, oh, we'll send them the hardback, they'll like that better. But paperbacks. One thing that is nice is one case of delicious wine. Thank you very much. It's a signed first edition, which is quite nice. I'll probably keep it. I haven't got a lot of room for hardbacks. Like, my hardback bookcases are full, and I'm making little piles of hardbacks. I've got another bookcase coming at some point when a relative moves house. And I also managed to get very, very, very cheaply The Festering, which I've never managed to get a copy of. It's always been a little bit expensive, so I thought I'll get other ones. I don't know why The Festering is so expensive. I will read it and try and establish why it's so expensive. I think it might be time for I did Guy Smith at Hamlin. I've done like a couple of videos about him. I've done I Love Guy Smith. I've done I Love all the stuff that he wrote while he was at Hamlin, apart from Doomflight. And then I think it's time for a like post-Hamlin Guy Smith video, which means I'll have to sit and read loads of Guy Smith books. I got another Hell's Angels one, Angels on My Mind by Mick Norman. I'm steadily collecting the Hell's Angels and kind of skinhead type subculture books that New English Library published in the 70s. They are quite expensive, so it's a fairly steady process. Speaking of subculture books published by New English Library, this was £4, and I was so thrilled to get it. I was like, oh, ordered it, and then just didn't. You know, when you order something that's too cheap for what it is, and you think that's not going to arrive. Look at that. Okay, so it's got a remainder cut. It's got a sticker on the front. It's got a sticker on the back. But I can sort that, definitely. But look at these dudes. So if you don't know this one, this is Punk Rock by Richard Allen, who was Jim Moffat, who wrote all the skinhead books and stuff like that. And I mean, the skinhead books don't reflect the attitudes and behaviour of a lot of skinheads that I know. And I'm sure punk rock is going to be the same. I love that guy. Look at him. He's got, I am so punk. I've got a swastika on my cheek, chip fork in my pocket, aviator shades. Nothing says punk rock like swastika, chip fork, aviators. That is like punk uniform. And Jim Moffat was like, apparently, sorry Jim, but everyone says it. He was like a grumpy old stick in the mud that didn't like teens. So he kind of wrote all these books out of contempt for these particular subcultures. So that's next on my reading list and will be started later on today. And lastly, in this lovely grab of things, is another pricey New English Library book that I've been after for ages. And it's The Beast of Jersey. By Joan Paynell. Now, it is true crime. Price-wise, it's weird. It's like 30-40 quid everywhere. This, and I just sat waiting, checking, as I do, booksellers' inventories, because I figured somebody would look at one and go, not sure what that is, list it fairly cheap, and I'd be there to pounce. So, yeah, I don't read a lot of true crime, because it gets me a bit depressed. A lot of them are a bit miserable. But this, The Beast of Jersey was Edward Paynell, who, if you don't know about The Beast of Jersey, he obviously lived on Jersey. It's a shame Bergerac wasn't around at the same time, because he'd have sorted it out. And he was... he never murdered anybody, but he was a horribly violent and depraved attacker who would wear that outfit. I'll stick a photo up of his outfit because it looks like something out of a movie. And he would sometimes grab people and abduct them in the street, but a lot of the time he'd find a way to get into their house and just kind of wait next to their bed, and when they realised somebody was there, they'd turn over and see him. But one of the things that made me want to read this book, it's actually by his wife, who, I mean, he carried out a series of attacks over 11 years in Jersey, and it's not a huge community in Jersey, and there isn't a huge amount of, you know, like I live in a big city and I love it, and there's different people and different faces all the time. Jersey, you know, it's a smaller community that there's holiday makers, but you know, the residents probably stay the same. You're born there, you live there, you die there, I guess. And he carried this out for 11 years, and his wife never knew. I genuinely think she never knew. There's also some mention in that particular book of him carrying out some kind of ritual things. When the police kind of raided where he kept all his stuff, there was stuff set up that would suggest ritualistic behaviour, almost like some kind of weird sham satanic type thing. So it's quite fascinating, I think, the whole thing, and that particular book being written by his wife. And I'm not saying it in like, I want to see what she's got to say for herself, but like, I want to hear her story and her words, and like, but with any true crime, I think it's really important, right from Jack the Ripper right up to like modern books about true crime. Yes, they're lurid, and yes, there's a ghoulish drive in people that read them to read them. But let's not forget that lives were genuinely ruined and destroyed and ended by vicious and brutal people. Right, that all got a bit heavy, didn't it? Sorry. So, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you've got any thoughts on Stuart Kinder, if you've got like, do you know what, I read this book and it's exactly like the Cannibal or the Institute, then leave us a comment. We might be able to uncover more of the mystery. Or if you're convinced it is Angus Wells, then tell me why. I'm not just fishing for like comments. You know I don't do that, like, hey, like, subscribe, click the notification bell, leave a comment. I don't do all that. If you like my channel, you'll keep watching. If you don't, you won't. That's fine. But I'd genuinely be interested if any of you lot have kind of gone, yeah, I think it's them, or I think it's them, because pseudonyms are so difficult to figure out. In the meantime, I'll leave it there. You lovely lot, thank you for watching, and I will see you wonderful folks in the next video. Pesky punk rockers.